Welcome back to the deep dive. Usually, we kick these off with a bit of a spark.
Right, like a weird piece of trivia or something.
Yeah, exactly. A counterintuitive fact to get the gears turning.
Yeah.
But I'm going to level with you right out of the gate today. Today is different.
It's very different.
We are shifting gears entirely. We have a piece of source material in front of us that is, well, it's heavy.
Yeah.
It is raw. It is deeply personal. And quite frankly, it's just difficult to read.
It is.
So before we go any further, I really need to give a very clear content warning. We are going to be discussing a personal narrative titled The Silence of Kin, a First Confession. And this details a firsthand account of childhood sexual abuse.
And, it's definitely a departure from our usual fare.
Okay.
But when we looked at this piece, it became immediately clear that we couldn't just skim over it.
No, we couldn't.
It's heavy, yes, but it's also incredibly lucid. The author who is writing this as an adult looking back, he doesn't just tell us what happened. He dissects the mechanics of it. He breaks down the silence, the physiology of the freeze response, and the massive blind spots we have as a society regarding who actually commits these acts.
That's the thing that really grabbed me. It's not just a recounting of trauma. It's almost an autopsy of a memory.
That's a good way to put it.
Our mission today is to walk through this narrative, step by step. We really want to understand the reality of how abuse happens in spaces that are supposed to be the safest places on Earth.
The title itself, The Silence of Kin, it really sets the stakes here.
It does. It suggests the danger isn't lurking in a dark alleyway. It's sitting right there at the dinner table.
And that is the central tension we have to sit with today. We need to set the stage properly because this is a story about memory, trust, and the ultimate betrayal of that trust.
Yeah.
This narrative forces us to look at how a child processes grooming, though obviously they wouldn't know that word through the lens of family affection.
Right. They just think of it as love.
Exactly. It completely challenges that comfortable stranger danger myth we all cling to. So as we go through this, I want you to pay attention not just to the events, but to the internal world of the child the narrator describes.
Let's get into the context then, because the setting here is crucial. The narrator describes himself as being very young, maybe 5 or 6 years old.
Very young.
It's the school holidays. And where is he? He's at his maternal grandmother's house. Now pause for a second and think about what grandma's house represents in our cultural imagination.
Oh, it's the ultimate safe zone.
Exactly.
It's the sanctuary. It's sensory overload in the best possible way. The smells of baking, the noise of relatives, that feeling of being suspended from the rules of normal life.
Yeah, you can eat cookies before dinner.
Right. And the narrator specifically mentions that it felt safe. It was filled with people who were excited to see him, and that atmosphere is actually weaponized here.
That's a profoundly disturbing thought, that the safety itself is the weapon.
It is, but think about it biologically. When a child or anyone really enters a space they define as safe, their threat detection systems go completely offline.
They power down.
Exactly. You aren't scanning the room for danger. You are primed for connection, for hugs, for play. Your guard isn't just down, it basically doesn't exist.
Wow.
And that creates the perfect camouflage for a perpetrator who is already inside the perimeter.
And that leads us directly to the what the source calls the special treatment. The narrator describes a specific day where his maternal uncle, someone he knows, someone he loves, decides to take him and his cousin to the movies.
Yeah.
On the surface, this is just a nice uncle doing a nice thing. It's a holiday treat.
Right, and this is where we see the manipulation of trust. It's subtle. It's not a man in a van offering candy. It's a family member offering an experience.
Yeah.
But look at the details this source provides about the theater itself. This is where the dynamic shifts.
Yeah, the seating arrangement. This part, honestly, it really made my stomach turn when I read it.
It's hard to read.
The uncle takes the narrator and a cousin, who's a year younger. They get into the theater, and the uncle puts the cousin in a seat. But he pulls the narrator, this 5 or 6-year-old boy, onto his lap.
And this is the moment of grooming. It's a test of boundaries, but what matters is how the child interprets it. The narrator actually gives us his internal monologue from that exact moment.
Right.
He remembers wondering why. He thinks, why am I on the lap and my cousin is in the seat?
But he doesn't conclude, this is weird.
No.
He rationalizes it. He writes, in my child's mind, I thought it was affection, maybe special treatment because we visited occasionally.
That rationalization is heartbreaking, but it is also completely logical for a 6-year-old.
How so?
Well, children are egocentric by nature. They try to make sense of the world based on their very limited experiences. His framework for this uncle is family and love.
Right.
So when a boundary is crossed, his brain doesn't have a category for sexual abuse.
Right.
It tries to jam this square peg into the round hole of affection. He interprets the violation as favoritism.
So the trap is set. You have a child who feels safe, who feels chosen or favored, sitting in the dark. The narrator describes the lights going out. The movie starts. And that's when the reality shifts.
Yeah.
The source says, and then his hand went inside my pants. It's so sudden in the text.
It's a jarring shift. You go from a public social space to a private secret violation. The darkness of the theater acts as a literal physical barrier from the rest of the world.
I want to pause here because we need to talk about the reaction.
Yeah.
I think if you asked the average person on the street what a child would do in that situation, they'd say, oh, they'd scream, they'd run away, they'd make a scene.
Absolutely. We have this cinematic idea of resistance.
And they expect the fight response.
Or at least the flight response. And because we expect that, when a victim says, I didn't do anything, society often wrongly interprets that as consent.
Yeah, which is awful.
It is.
Mhm.
But the source gives us a masterclass in the third response, the one we so often ignore. The freeze. The narrator is very explicit. He says, I don't remember screaming. I don't remember trying to run. What I remember clearly is freezing.
He breaks it down even further, saying, my body froze, my mind froze. Can we unpack that?
Sure.
Because I feel like the word freeze sounds passive, like it's a choice to stay still.
Right.
But it's not a choice, is it?
No, it's absolutely not a choice. It is a biological override.
Okay.
It's an evolutionary mechanism. When the amygdala, which is the threat center of the brain, detects a danger that is overwhelming or confusing or inescapable, it can trigger what's called tonic immobility.
Tonic immobility.
Yes. It's literally a shutdown of the motor cortex.
Yeah.
The brain essentially disconnects from the body to protect the psyche from the horror of what's happening. You see this in nature all the time with animals playing dead. It's a survival instinct, not a sign of agreement.
So the child is physically locked in place.
Mm-hmm.
But the source adds another layer that I think is just as important.
The language aspect.
Yes. It wasn't just his body that couldn't move, it was his language. He writes, at that age, I didn't have words. I didn't have understanding. I didn't even know how to recognize what was happening to me.
That is such a profound and really a devastating insight. I didn't have words.
Yeah.
Think about the vocabulary of a 5-year-old. You know colors, you know shapes, you know the names of your relatives. You do not know the vocabulary of sexual violation.
No, of course not.
He knew it felt wrong. He says that clearly in the text, but he couldn't name it. And in a child's world, if you can't name a thing, it's almost like it isn't real. Or you certainly can't communicate it to the adults who might help you.
It creates this total vacuum. He's physically frozen by shock and linguistically paralyzed by ignorance. The source asserts very strongly that this silence was not consent.
Never.
It was an inability to navigate a situation that his brain literally couldn't comprehend.
Precisely. The silence is the result of the trauma, not a precursor to permission.
And this wasn't just a momentary thing. The narrative jumps forward to explain that this didn't just go away when the lights came up.
No, it rarely does.
The source says it took him many years to understand what that moment truly was. It wasn't until he was much older that he could look back and say, that was sexual abuse. That was a crime.
And that delay is incredibly common. We call it traumatic amnesia or simply repression.
Mm-hmm.
The brain boxes it up and shoves it into the basement because a 6-year-old cannot function with that reality.
Right.
But the source makes a beautiful, painful observation about the cost of that storage. The uncle is dead now, but the narrator says the scar remained quiet, deep, and long-lasting.
He talks about it shaping his life in ways he only recognized later. It's almost like a structural crack in the foundation of a house.
Oh.
You know, you might not see it on the drywall, but the whole house sits a little crooked because of it.
That's a really great analogy. It changes how you navigate trust, how you navigate intimacy in your adult life.
It changes everything.
It does. And this leads us to what the narrator calls one of the hardest truths. We touched on it in the intro, but we need to really drive this home because it makes people deeply uncomfortable.
The stranger danger myth.
Yes.
We are drilled on this from the time we can walk. Don't talk to strangers. Watch out for the windowless van. But the source confronts this head on. The narrator writes, child predators are rarely strangers. They're often people we know, people we trust, people who are part of our everyday lives.
It is a terrifying admission for society to make, and I think we need to ask ourselves, why do we cling to the stranger danger myth so tightly if the data and stories exactly like this one tell us otherwise?
I think it's because the alternative is just unbearable.
Yeah.
It's easy to be vigilant against a monster you don't know. It's easy to lock the front door. But if the monster's your brother or your coach or your best friend...
Exactly. The social cost of suspicion is just too high.
What do you mean by that?
Well, if you suspect a stranger, you're just being a protective parent. Society rewards that. But if you suspect your uncle, you're ruining the family dynamic.
Oh, right. You're causing a scene.
You're paranoid. You're causing drama. So we psychologically prefer the myth of the stranger because it allows us to maintain our close relationships without this constant burning anxiety.
But the narrator is telling us that comfort is bought at the expense of the child's safety.
It absolutely is.
He says this reality makes the responsibility to protect children heavier and even more urgent because it requires us to essentially police the people we love.
And that is an incredibly difficult thing to ask of a parent, to look at your own kin with a critical eye. But that is exactly what the silence of kin refers to in the title.
It's not just the child's silence.
No, it's the family's collective silence,
Yes.
the refusal to believe that our people could do this thing.
There's another dimension to this specific source that we have to spend some real time on. The narrator is male, and he explicitly calls out a massive societal blind spot regarding gender.
This is a really critical piece of the puzzle. He writes, our society speaks, and rightly so, about the abuse of girl children. He validates that focus completely.
Right.
But then he pivots and says, society often refuses to acknowledge another uncomfortable truth. Boys are also vulnerable to sexual abuse.
Why is that? Why is there such a massive gap in how we talk about boys versus girls in this context?
It mostly comes down to our cultural scripts about masculinity. We raise boys to be tough, to be independent, to be the protectors, not the protected.
Yeah, boys don't cry, all of that.
Exactly. The idea of a male victim clashes violently with our definition of manhood. There is a deep-seated stigma that suggests if a boy is abused, he is somehow weak or less of a man.
Or even worse, there's the misconception that boys always want sex.
Yes.
That if a female relative or a teacher initiates something, the boy got lucky.
Yeah.
Or if it's a male perpetrator, there's this homophobic panic that gets mixed in.
Right. The confusion for the victim is immense.
Yeah.
And physically, this is complicated for boys too. A boy's body might react physiologically to touch, getting an erection, for example, even if he is absolutely terrified.
Oh.
That biological reaction creates immense shame. The boy thinks, my body reacted, so I must have wanted it. But that's a lie. That is just physiology, not consent. But without anyone explaining that to him, the silence just deepens.
The source uses a very powerful phrase here. Ignorance does not mean innocence.
Yes. Ignorance does not mean innocence.
What does he really mean by that in this context?
He's pointing the finger at society. Just because we choose to be ignorant of male sexual abuse, just because we look away, doesn't mean those boys are innocent or safe.
Doesn't mean it's not happening.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Our ignorance doesn't create a magical shield around them. It just leaves them alone in the dark. We are failing to protect them because we simply refuse to believe they need protection in the same way girls do.
That brings us to his motivation. Why write this? Why put this out into the world?
He says very clearly, I am not sharing this story for sympathy. He doesn't want our pity. He says he is sharing it because silence protects the wrong people.
That is the ultimate takeaway from this whole piece. Silence acts as a shield. But who is it shielding?
Right.
We think silence shields the family reputation. We think it shields the child from shame. But in reality, silence is a fortress for the perpetrator.
Because it lets them hide.
It allows them to operate with total impunity. As long as the victim feels too ashamed to speak and the family is too comfortable to look, the abuser is safe. It's a chilling realization. This first confession, as he calls it, is a strategic act. He is dismantling that fortress. He's taking the weapon of silence away from the abuser.
And notice the final line of the piece. He says, this is my first confession, and it is only the beginning.
Only the beginning. That feels heavy, too.
It is. It suggests that healing isn't a single event. You don't just get over it. Breaking the silence is just the first step in a long, messy process of unraveling years of trauma.
It implies there's more to tell, more to understand. So we've covered a lot of dark ground today. We've walked through the sensory trap of the grandmother's house, the physiological reality of a freeze response, the myth of stranger danger, and the invisible crisis of male victimization.
A lot to process.
Where do we leave the listener with this?
I think for you listening, this can't just be a sad story you heard. The relevance is immediate. We all have kin. We all have those circles of trust.
We do.
This source is demanding that we audit those circles. It's asking us to look at our own families, our own communities with open eyes.
It's about redefining what safety looks like.
Yeah.
Safety isn't just a lock on the door. It's communication. It's giving kids the vocabulary to say no or this feels wrong, even to an uncle or a grandpa.
And it's about validating that freeze response. If you are listening to this and you or someone you know didn't fight back during a trauma, you need to hear this.
Yeah.
That was survival. Your brain did exactly what it was designed to do to keep you alive. The silence was a physiological cage, not a moral feeling.
And specifically for the men listening, we have to break that stigma. We have to make it okay to be vulnerable.
We have to stop assuming innocence or resilience based on gender. Trauma doesn't care if you're a boy or a girl, and our protection shouldn't either.
This deep dive has been a tough one, probably the toughest we've done. But as the narrator says, silence protects the wrong people. By bringing this into the light, by dissecting the mechanics of that theater seat, we are hopefully chipping away at that protection.
Absolutely. Sunlight is the best disinfectant.
I want to leave you with a final thought to carry with you today. The narrator said his scars shaped his life in ways he only recognized decades later.
Yeah.
If predators are rarely strangers, and if silence is the tool that keeps them safe, I want you to ask yourself something. What uncomfortable conversations are you avoiding in your own life to keep the peace?
That's the real question.
We so often prioritize comfort over truth. But if we actually started listening, really listening to the silence of the kin around us, what else might we uncover?
And like the author said, this is only the beginning.
Thank you for trusting us with your time on this deep dive. Take care of yourselves and take care of each other.